Hi guys, welcome to Global Hub TV. A warning for the foreign minister and people of South Africa. This is Femi Fani-Kayode responding to Dr. Grace Naledi Mandisa Pandor, South African Minister of International Relations, that claimed that Africans, Nigerians, all of them in South Africa are all dealing in drugs. He said they are not going to compensate Nigerians, the ones that have lost businesses and properties. According to Femi Fani-Kayode, he said this is unacceptable. Is this the sort of thing that ought to be said by the South African government when we are still in mourning and when we have not even buried our compatriots that were cruelly slain, bludgeoned to death and cut to pieces in the streets of South Africa? At the time when the irresponsible and insensitive, shameless, conflicted, self-hating, pitiful and demonic creatures that calls herself the foreign minister of South Africa should be apologizing to the Nigerian people for the mindless savagery and barbarity of our blood-crazed compatriots. She's pointing accusing fingers at their victims and the objects of their collective hate and seeking to demonize them. What have we done to deserve this? First you kill us, then you seek to justify it and criminalize us. Does this she-devil of a foreign minister really believe that innocent Nigerian men and women and children should be butchered at a will in the streets of South Africa by bloodthirsty and bestial mobs? Worse still, she thinks it is right and proper that this is done with the full endorsement and support of both the South African government and police? Is that the way forward? Is that the way to build bridges in Africa and enhance peace and stability on the continent? Can such behavior be justified or defended under the circumstances? And that's what Femi Fani-Kayode is asking. So what's your take about this? What would she do or think if the Nigerian government and people decide to reciprocate and meth the same treatment out to South Africans and that reside in Nigeria and South African companies that are still situated here? In any case, how many of those that were butchered over the years were drug dealers? If it is true that as many Nigerians deal in drug as she has suggested, why can't the South African government apprehend, arrest and prosecute them and send them to jail rather than demonize, misrepresent, target and kill innocent and defenseless Nigerians? This is a clear case of racial stereotyping and a squalid and shameful attempt to justify hate, racism, xenophobia, self-hate, black on black violence and murder. Permit me to educate the South African foreign minister to set the record straight. There are thousands of Nigerian professionals, academics, lecturers, intellectuals, businessmen, teachers, scientists, engineers and doctors in your country working hard, doing a great job and contributing massively to the development of your country and economy. The fact that your people hate Nigerians and enjoy killing us has nothing to do with drugs, human trafficking or drug trafficking. It is because your people are hateful, ignorant, xenophobic, lazy, racist and envious of ours. Now, a Roman Catholic bishop or priest in South Africa responded to this too. To this woman, he said, and to a lot of South Africans, he actually said, this is xenophobia and has nothing to do with drug trafficking. And Femi Fani-Kayode went further to say, and the few irresponsible Nigerians that go to South Africa and indulge in terrible, unforgivable crimes like drug and human trafficking and gang-related violence do so only because your people have a terrible weakness, an undue fascination, and an unsatiable appetite for drug, alcohol, prostitutes. In fact, he went further to say men and women of easy virtue and the dark, ugly and wild side of life. It is therefore not surprising that South Africa has, for the better part of last 25 years, been described as the world capital for homicide and the country with the highest number of people that have been afflicted with HIV/AIDS. Now, I know that there are a lot of stories as regard this. I mean, someone came out, a Caucasian South African, said that his own people were the people that actually created this HIV virus in a laboratory, and they infected the South Africans in the hope of killing them. Well, we all know that South Africa is full of HIV anyway, just like how it is all over the world. He went further to say, rather than work hard like their Nigerian counterparts, South Africans prefer to go to sleazy and cheap nightclubs, to gamble on gaming machines and poker tables, to drink huge amounts of beer, to take massive amounts of hard drugs and stay at home, watch television and sleep. They are not particularly good at anything except singing beautiful songs and killing their fellow Africans. It is for this singular reason that their women love and respect Nigerian men and have nothing but contempt for their own. Generally speaking, Nigerian men are strong, productive, virile, focused, courageous, industrious, adventurous, hardworking with a touch of arrogance, and they excel in all their ways. Sadly, the average South African male does not possess these virtues or qualities. So, what's your take about this? You live in South Africa. Are you from any other African country? What's your take about this? Of course, I do hear, I hear this most of the time, even from Cameroonians and other African countries. They say once a Nigerian comes over to a place, now I'm not saying all Nigerians anyway, but the ones with the right focus, they tend to make things happen somehow. It does not stop there. It went further to say, for the better part of last 50 years, Nigeria has been the major military and economic power in Africa, and we have used our wealth, power, and influence wisely and expeditiously to the advantage of many countries on the continent. For example, had it not been for us, the minority white Boers would still be ruling over the black South Africans, and apathy would still have been firmly in place. We nationalized British Petroleum and Barclays Bank because of them in the late 1970s, and thereby compelled the British to accept our demand of colored brown majority rule in South Africa and Zimbabwe, and to stop supporting apartheid and white minority governments. Yes, it's true. Nigeria actually did a lot. I mean, we opened our universities to them. They spent a lot of money, in billions of dollars, in helping South Africa and Zimbabwe. And a lot of things were done. In fact, the companies in Nigeria, owned by Caucasian-owned companies, British, American companies, were held onto by Nigeria, and that was when Nigeria was actually functioning. They helped their brother. It went further to say, we are far ahead of South Africa in terms of education and virtually every other sphere of human endeavor. We have opened up our country for them to come and invest in without any preconditions, obstacles, or trade barriers. Today, Nigeria is by far the biggest market for their expertise, products, goods, services. Of course, we know we have MTN. We have a lot of conglomeration of companies in Nigeria owned by South Africa. Nigeria actually opened up their country. So he said Nigerian companies have invested heavily in and operate in South Africa, whilst many South African companies have invested heavily and operate in Nigeria. As a matter of fact, some of those companies make more money from the Nigerian market and their Nigerian operations than they do in the whole of the rest of Africa put together. And that is true. Just imagine how much MTN makes. In fact, MTN makes a lot of money and they take it out of Nigeria without reinvesting. This is what we have offered and given them, and yet they have offered and given us next to nothing in return. All we get from them are violence and heartache. Historically, in every other way, they are very much our juniors. Our people are educated at Oxford, Cambridge, and the very best universities in the world since 1860. South African colored people never went to real university until the 1990s after apartheid fell. We have liberated and brought peace, justice, and stability to many African countries, and been a blessing to the African continent for many decades despite our present challenges. Whether it be Angola, Mozambique, Congo, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Ghana, Namibia, Syria, Leone, Liberia, Sao Tome and Principe, Sudan, Chad, Niger, and so many others. We were there in full force with our money, our resources, our hands, our logistical support, our oil, our economic concessions, our aid, and in some cases our troops, military troops. That's what it means. We shed blood, and our blood was shed for other African countries over the years. Yet all we get in return are insults. If you say Nigerians are drug pushers and human traffickers, then I would say the South Africans are losers, racist, dropout, failures, genocidal maniacs. Worse still, had the white Boers not built up South Africa, it would still be a barren land, and the black population will be nothing but slaves that live in filthy and squalid little townships. Despite all the razzmatazz and great public relations about being a happy and prosperous rainbow nation where everyone is so happy and is treated so well, the truth is that South Africa remains a country with a black body and a white head. I say this because even though political control and leadership has been ceded to the blacks, 80% of the multinational corporations, big businesses, industries, and private sector and economy, and 90% of the choicest land and big farms, best farmland, still remain in the hands of the Caucasian Boer minority. Given this, it is any wonder that black South Africans are literally going mad, and deeply frustrated and filled with hatred and bitterness. They have nothing, and unlike in the days of Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela and Thabo Mbeki, all great and inspiring men of strength, courage, wisdom and conviction, profound wisdom, other than a handful of new political leaders who are essentially corrupt, weak, fearful, divided, conflicted and uninspiring token niggers and Uncle Toms, with the possible exception of a bright and courageous and rising young star by the name of Julius Malema. Malema is an activist, and he's been known to speak against this xenophobia, and he has told them, South Africans, the truth, but they realize that we all realize that they are not ready to listen. Their prospect of ever amounting to anything over the next 100 years is very dim. The real power still resides in the hands of the minority Caucasian Boers, and the prospect for a prosperous and bright future lies heavily in their favor at the expense of the majority colored people there. If only the South Africans knew and remember their history and considered ours, they would be praying for Nigeria and thanking us every day rather than insulting and killing us. Without our support and the pressure we brought to bear, the great Nelson Mandela may never have been freed, and the ANC and its armed wing Umzonto We Selzi would not have received the massive and robust funding and support that it did throughout the 1960s, 1970s and 1980s. Together with the Cubans and the Libyans, Nigeria did more for the liberation of South Africa and South African majority rule than any other nation in the world. What the South Africans are doing to Nigeria today make me regret the fact that we did so much for them in the past. They have repaid our good with evil. Consequently, evil will never leave their doorstep. They have shed our blood for no just cause, and the heavens will respond and avenge us. They have made us cry and shed. They've troubled us, they've bothered us, and distraught our compatriots, and for this they shall pay a heavy price. The South African foreign minister and those that share our racist and deplorable disposition and xenophobic views should consider their facts and implications of our words and actions before she ventures to open her fat, ugly and very undiplomatic mouth to speak untruth and garbage about Nigeria and Nigerians again. Failing to do so may provoke a series of cataclysmic events and unpredictable and harsh reprisals, which would result in the final demystification and total humiliation of the Rainbow Nation and the painful everlasting disgrace of its people. Make no mistake about it, even in Nigeria, in a weakened state and with all our challenges, still big, strong enough to bring South Africa down to its knees. And if the killing and mass murder of our people does not stop, that is precisely what we shall do. A word is enough for the wise. Permit me to conclude this contribution with the following. Many years ago, in the early mid-1970s, when apartheid was alive and well in South Africa, when I was a young student at Arrow, which is undoubtedly remains the best private school in England, I broke the jaw of a blonde blue-blood English-speaking Caucasian South African fellow student who said some very nasty things about colored South Africans during a history class. During a heated debate about racial segregation and the South African Mixed Race Act, which made it criminal offense for colored and Caucasians to get married or have sexual relations, he got up and said before the entire class that allowing those dirty colored dogs to touch our beautiful, pure Caucasian white women is sacrilege. It is against the laws of God. It is like getting a monkey to mate with a human. Finally, he said no sane Caucasian woman would never want to have sex with a black African monkey, and any of them that would do that should be sent to jail. I reached swiftly and without hesitation, without any warning or even words of anger. I left my desk, walked up to him, broke his jaw with one clean blow from my right fist. He never knew what hit him. I remember hearing and enjoying the way his jaw popped open and cracked. It was a strange noise, and he hit the floor with his leg started to shake controllably after he lost consciousness. For one horrendous moment, I thought I had killed him, but thankfully, eventually his eyes opened. He sat up and he was rushed to the hospital in a stretcher. He hailed from one of the biggest and richest white families in South Africa, where and still are in the diamond mining business. I almost got expelled from Arrow for my wild and unruly behavior until I gave my reasons for hitting him to the school authorities. They were shocked and equally applauded me by what they said, which they rightly regarded as a grave and reckless provocation, and they decided to let me off the hook. I was reprimanded and warned, and I remember that the headmaster wrote a formal letter about the incident to my father, who was living with me, for jeopardizing my entire academic career simply because of a racial slight or slur. Papa said, you did not have to hit him and almost kill the poor boy. You could have attempted to educate him in a civilized manner, and the worst insulting back. Yet I had no regret or remorse about my course of action or the choice I made. To my eternal credit, I never apologized for my action to the South African or the school authorities, my father, or anyone else. The truth is that I was proud of what I did, and I believe that defending the honor of a colored South African colleagues was far more important than staying at Arrow. I was prepared to risk it all by physically assaulting the Caucasian guy, and I did it with relish. My gamble paid off, and the South African boy, as sober as ever, never insulted or spoke ill of any colored person again in my presence. As a matter of fact, we ended up becoming friends in the following year, and I will never forget, he told me just before we left Arrow in 1977. I remember the words very vividly because I wrote them down at the time, and I have meditated over them for years. He said, "You don't understand the Bantus," meaning colored South Africans. He went on to say, the day they get in power in South Africa is the day that South Africa will begin to die. Since the 17th century, we Boers built up everything there, and they contributed nothing. We fought the Zulus and later the British. We built and developed that land with our flesh, sweat, and blood. Giving a country like South Africa to them is like giving a monkey a loaded gun. They will kill you and everyone around them. Eventually, they will kill everyone and themselves. They are not like you Nigerians. They have no history or class. They are unenlightened. They are ungrateful, primitive, uncouth. They are very backward. One day, the rest of Africa will know them for who they are. Judging from the words of this Caucasian man, this South African foreign minister, judging from the words of this South African foreign minister and the xenophobic and racist the position of the South African president, government, and people, it appears the day has finally come. Now, this that I've read out to you is very lengthy, and this is the words of Femi Fani-Kayode, the former aviation minister. Now, what's your take about this? Do you think it's correct? Let us meet at the comment section below. And while you're there, may I remind you, if you have not done so, let us build this channel together. Tap on that subscription button and also the red notification icon bell below so that you'll be notified whenever new videos are uploaded. Thanks for stopping by.